Welcome back, everybody. It's Zach here. Bring you guys another fantasy football video. And so I'm going to highlight about 11 players that I'm super excited about in terms of being really, honestly, great values. These are sleepers that I'm highlighting and guys that I think have a great chance at sort of being real difference makers for your squad that really cost you effectively nothing. This will be, in order to make this list here, the players that I'm talking about needed to be drafted after pick 150 by ADP. So any player that I don't talk about, if you're worried about them maybe not making the list or any of your favorite sleepers, it might be because they maybe didn't make that cutoff. Last slide or whatever here will be me talking about some players that I would have listed as well that were picked just a little bit too early. So super fun making these videos. It's always super fun to sort of look back on how things went last year too and see if I managed to hit on any of them, see what we can do in terms of what we're looking at for true breakout and like real useful potential out of these guys that are being drafted this late. So I love making these videos. If there's anybody you disagree with or anybody else you wanted me to talk about, feel free to let me know in the comments. It's a lot of fun to see what we got going on there. And yeah, really fun making this video. So with that, let's get into it. So just before I get into talking about some of the players I want to highlight this season, I do want to highlight that we were actually pretty good at this last season, and I wanted to go over some players that I highlighted in this video last year. 4 players that I think hit pretty well for us. The 2 big names here would be De'Von Achane and Tank Dell, who both made the sleeper videos at some point last season. Other than that, I had Matthew Stafford and Zay Flowers on some sleeper lists, so those were some guys that I really do think panned out well for us. Obviously not listed here are like the 10 to 15 other players that we talked about that didn't hit, but that's the nature of these players. These are obviously going to be guys that have really low hit rates, but if you can hit on a guy like De'Von Achane, a guy like Tank Dell, a guy like Puka Nacua was last season, I missed on him. I didn't highlight him in one of my videos, but plenty of potential here for if you can hit on any of these guys. Does a huge deal for actually really improving your fantasy team. So just wanted to sort of highlight that we actually did pretty okay with this last season and that I think in general I've got a decent understanding of what I'm doing here. So starting things off with one of my favorite sleepers is going to be Rico Dowdle. And it's just not every day that you get a shot to draft who could be the legitimate running back 1 for a really good offense. Rico Dowdle is currently being drafted at pick 153, so he just barely made the cut here. And I'm not here to tell you that Rico Dowdle is an elite talent. I don't think he's a special player. I think he's kind of just a guy. He's a good to mediocre NFL running back. And the fact of the matter is, I do believe that makes him a better talent than Ezekiel Elliott at this point in their careers. And I think there's a legitimate shot here for Dowdle to earn the starting role in this offense. And if he can get like a full 60, 65% of the workhorse role in this offense, he could be a fringe top 10 guy. We saw Tony Pollard actually put up fringe top 15 or top 10 numbers last season, despite being one of the least efficient running backs in the NFL, especially near the goal line. And I think that we could legitimately see Rico Dowdle earn the starting role in this offense. And the real risk, really, to me, is just that I do think Zeke probably projects to be the goal line back anyway. But Zeke is a player who's definitely aged in his NFL career. He's got a lot of wear and tear on his body. It's very reasonable to assume that at some point we're going to see Zeke miss some time. And even if he doesn't, I do think that Dowdle could easily be a legitimate starting player with Ezekiel Elliott being healthy. And I think the floor, honestly, if this roster stays the same, is that Dowdle ends up in like a 50-50 timeshare in a really good offense. And that's going to make him a decent weekly flyer. He's someone that you could play in a pinch if you need to, and that's sort of the floor case for a guy you're drafting this late. And obviously, we know what the upside is. He could obviously win the starting role. He could certainly have a lot of upside in weeks where Zeke misses, and I think one of my favorite things to do is to highlight running backs that are in ambiguous backfields, especially in really good offenses. I always look back at like last season. If you targeted the Miami Dolphins, those were 2 guys that were going super late, De'Von Achane and Raheem Mostert. We didn't know how that backfield was going to pan out, so none of those guys got drafted very high. And because of that, if you drafted those guys, you made out like a bandit. You got a ton of value there. And I think the same thing's playing out here with the Cowboys. I don't think either Dowdle or Zeke has the talent to put up the kind of numbers that Mostert or Achane did, but the offense is really good. You could see a spike touchdown season for Dowdle here, and there aren't a ton of weapons outside of CeeDee Lamb in this offense, so I do think Dowdle could actually end up in a lot larger role than we're anticipating. Sticking with the tune of talking about some sleeper running backs here, I'm going to highlight Tyrone Tracy Jr. He's the rookie running back for the New York Giants. They took him in the 5th round, and he was effectively a wide receiver in college. They sort of did finally shift him over to the running back spot in his last year, but he's going to immediately slot into the Giants' offense as they're passing down running back. And the only competition for touches here with Tyrone Tracy is Devin Singletary. Not exactly a player that's done any sort of fantastic things over the course of his career. I do think that Singletary is actually a relatively decent value as well here, but it's easy to see the path for Tyrone Tracy to be a player that's on the field a lot, and I just think he's a good player on an offense that's going to need playmakers. outside of Malik Neighbors, there really isn't anybody in this offense that's going to demand that they're used in this offense. So we could see a guy like Tracy actually slot in and play a decent amount of wide receiver for this team. He could be used out of the slot. He's going to be used on passing down quite a bit. This is a team that we do expect to be trailing in most of their games. There could be a lot of 2-minute drill situations, a lot of opportunity here for this team to be playing from behind. And as bad as Daniel Jones is, he's good enough to get it done with this offense. You're going to have enough value there where he can pass the ball to the running back position, and coming off of a torn ACL, he might be less likely to run the ball. We could see him be even more pass happy towards the running backs, more likely to check it down than he has been in the past. And the Giants actually did throw the ball to the running back position a decent amount last season. They were 16th in the NFL on running back targets, and Tracy, I think, is going to command that role in this backfield. So for a guy that's effectively going undrafted, I think he's a guy that you'll be able to play in a pinch as like a flex or low-end running back too, especially in PPR formats. And if he just ends up being the better player than Singletary, there's certainly a world where he could potentially win that starting role. And if Singletary went down, there's nobody else in this backfield that deserves touches. Tracy could have some like really solid weeks for us this year. One of my favorite wide receivers to highlight in this video is going to be Demario Douglas, and I think that the ADP of Douglas is just kind of ridiculous right now. I really do think Douglas is far and away the best wide receiver the Patriots have, especially to open the season. I do like the talent of Jalen Polk, but it's not like the Patriots actually have a really long track record of drafting high-end wide receivers that turn out well. We can go back to guys like N'Keal Harry, plenty of busts, a long list of busts in this offense. You've got Thornton over the last couple of years. They just have not been able to draft a quality receiver, but Demario Douglas actually proved to be a competent and pretty good NFL wide receiver last season. He earned 5 or more targets in every single game last season after week 5. He was the clear wide receiver 1 in this offense, and the offense really should be at worst at least as good as what it was last season, if not better. They've got Jacoby Brissett coming in. Brissett is a competent NFL quarterback. He's going to be able to run this offense at a professional level, and Drake May is an exciting young rookie who could potentially elevate the ceiling of this offense as well. And the fact of the matter is, Demario Douglas is going to be the target leader in this offense. I know we want to be super excited about the guys like Baker and Polk as young rookies who could come in and potentially establish themselves as true alphas, but I don't think that's necessarily going to happen here. I think that Douglas is going to be the guy that's going to lead this team in targets, and he's currently being drafted as the wide receiver 77 as a guy who could easily be a guy that catches 5 passes a week, going to be heavily involved in the passing game. He gets utilized close to the line of scrimmage, so he should have plenty of reliable usage. And in PPR formats, I think he could easily end up being a wide receiver 3 for us. And with his ADP as the wide receiver 77, that's just way too low. I don't think he's got the upside that guys like Polk and Baker even do, but I don't think those guys are necessarily going to hit. I think the hit rate on Douglas is going to be pretty high here. I'm pretty confident he's going to be useful, and the price is just so low that there's no reason not to do it this season. Next, I wanted to highlight a sleeper tight end here, and I'm going to talk about Janu Smith, who's going to operate immediately as the tight end 1 in Miami, and that's an offense that's loaded with high-quality pass catchers, and Smith is actually finally a tight end that fits the mold and scheme that Miami wants to run. I know that historically they haven't been a team that's utilized the tight end position quite a bit, and I think we're getting too caught up in the fact that they haven't utilized that position in the past, and we're not really realizing that I just don't think they had the personnel to do it. They've been using Durham Smythe, not a guy that's going to catch the ball and do a lot with it in open space. And Janu Smith really is a guy that can do a lot with the ball in open space. He's definitely, as far as tight ends go, one of the better yards after catch guys in the NFL. He's a guy that's going to get utilized close to the line of scrimmage quite a bit, and it's going to be an offense in Miami that really doesn't have a clear wide receiver 3. I think there is a legitimate shot here for Janu Smith to potentially end up as the number 3 in targets on this offense, and if that actually pans out, Janu Smith is going to be an afterthought to the defenses. He's a guy that obviously you're not looking for, but you've got Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle running deep crossers across the field. So Janu Smith is going to be open all day underneath. You're going to get, honestly, a pretty high target share. I think you could see him with a 16 to 18% target share in an offense that's going to be really damn good, and he could actually have a ton of yards after the catch this season. I've always thought that Janu Smith is a really talented player. We saw flashes of it last season where he was actually, in many cases, the better fantasy option than Kyle Pitts in Atlanta. I think that if given the role here in a good offense, he's got the talent to actually put up a true breakout season here, and he's being drafted as the tight end 23. He's free in drafts. I think he's going to be a really popular waiver wire addition early on in the year. Could easily be a guy that ends up being that surprise tight end 1 that gets drafted or is undrafted in most drafts and ends up being like a reliable weekly starter for us. So I like Janu Smith quite a bit. I think he could easily end up putting up a really good year this year. And again, the price tag's right. If you wait on the tight end position, there are actually a lot of guys that are being drafted super late that have a lot of upside. But Janu Smith is one of my favorites. I did want to highlight him because I do think he's got a really good shot at a good year this year. Moving on to the first quarterback on this list, I'm actually going to highlight Gino Smith. And that's just really easy for me. He's just 2 years removed from finishing the season as the quarterback 6 overall, and he's currently being drafted as the quarterback 23. I understand that he had a down year last season. I think a lot of that coincided with just a little touchdown regression. This offense in general didn't look as good as it did the year before. DK Metcalf had a down year, had a lower reception or completion percentage when targeted, the lowest of his career. Jackson Smith and Jigba didn't exactly elevate this offense at all, didn't come in and do a whole lot as a rookie. And I think there's reasons and excuses we can make here for Seattle to have not necessarily had the best offense last season, but the fact of the matter is this is the best wide receiver core Geno Smith has ever had. DK Metcalf is still in his prime. Tyler Lockett is still a professional, really good wide receiver 2 in an offense, and there is the unknown here of JSN, who could legitimately end up being one of the better wide receivers in the NFL. He was drafted to be that good. I know he had a bit of a disappointing rookie season, but there's a real chance here for JSN to step into the wide receiver 2 role and let Lockett sort of operate as the number 3 here. And on top of that, this is going to be an offense in Seattle that's going to be a lot more modern. They brought in Ryan Grubb, the offensive coordinator for the University of Washington, and if you watch any college football or anything last season, you know that Michael Penix and Roma Dunze and Jalen Polk, they really set the college football world on fire, doing a lot of deep passing, a really pass-heavy attack. They ran 3 wide receiver sets on 79% of their plays at UW last season. Last season, Seattle ran 3 wide receiver sets on 62% of their plays, so a lot less pass-friendly of an offensive scheme than what Grubb is going to run. And I wouldn't be shocked at all if Gino ends up this season as a low-end quarterback 1, and he really is essentially free. We know Gino can offer legitimate rushing upside. He's not a guy that's going to put up 600 or 700 rushing yards, but he's going to give you 300 to 400, probably a couple rushing touchdowns over the course of the season. And if this really is a really pass-heavy offense, this is a team that has the tools and the weapons to be a really good offense. And if Gino can just play pretty well over the course of the season, he could easily be a top 12 quarterback by the end of the year. And it's just another reason why I think in general it makes a lot of sense to wait on the quarterback position. I think there are like 8 or 9 quarterbacks that I really like as guys that could be legitimate top 3 performers this season. But then even after that, you've got guys all the way down who are like Gino, who would be drafted as the quarterback 23 that still have a shot to be like solid weekly contributors for you. So I'll personally probably be waiting on the quarterback position in most of my drafts, at least until the middle rounds. But I think Gino is one of my favorite sleepers this year, and especially in 2 quarterback leagues, he's just being drafted way too low. Next up, I wanted to highlight a rookie wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Roman Wilson. Roman Wilson was drafted in the 3rd round by Pittsburgh, and he projects to be the starting slot wide receiver for Pittsburgh here in the year. The Steelers have a really long history of great draft selections at the wide receiver position, and I don't want to overstate that because obviously previous draft picks don't necessarily mean that the next players drafted mean a lot, but I don't want to understate it either. The Steelers are an organization who have proven to us they know what they're doing when they're drafting wide receivers, and they have a really high hit rate when drafting these guys later in drafts as well. You can look at Deontay Johnson drafted in the 5th round, Chase Claypool drafted late, George Pickens drafted in the 2nd round. You've got Antonio Brown, who was a super late draft pick. They've got a really long history of drafting receivers outside of the 1st round and still getting really high-end performance out of them. And I think Roman Wilson's has got a real shot to be that guy. At Michigan, he had an 85% separation rate against man in college. That was number 1 in this entire draft class. And what that means is that he got open on the highest percentage of his routes against man coverage. That he's a clear separator. He's a really great player. He is a bit of a smaller guy. He's probably not going to put up a ton of touchdowns, but I think he could easily fill in as like a really solid number 2 target in this offense behind George Pickens, and he should be playing that role that Lockett and Doug Baldwin really thrived in with Russ over many years over the course of their 10 years in Seattle. And like I said, he could easily be the number 2 target in this offense. And I think that the Steelers offense could actually be pretty good. Russ threw for over 30 touchdowns last season. It's going to be a relatively low passing volume offense like it normally is in Pittsburgh and with Russell Wilson in general. But I think it's going to be super efficient. Roman Wilson is going to have a lot of spike games, and he actually should see a really consistent target share because he's going to operate a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage than guys like Pickens. Could easily be the safety net, that go-to 3rd down guy. And I think Roman Wilson is just a really good player. He's going to earn a lot of snaps, and I'm really excited to see what he can do this season. And again, he's a player that's being drafted after the first 200 picks in drafts. He's free. I think he could easily end up being a really popular waiver pick, and I'm super excited to see what he could do this season. The one thing I'll note is that if the Steelers end up trading for someone like Ayuk, it's kind of out the window. I wouldn't expect him to be a real fantasy contributor if Ayuk came to Pittsburgh. Digging even a little bit deeper here, I'm going to talk about Cedric Tillman as a sleeper that I do like quite a bit over in Cleveland, and there are going to be quite a few things that need to break right for this to work out. He's currently being drafted as the wide receiver 100, going 242nd overall, but reports out of camp are that Cedric Tillman is lining up as the starting wide receiver opposite Amari Cooper. That comes with Jerry Jeudy playing out of the slot, and I think there's reasons to be pessimistic about the wide receiver room outside of Cedric Tillman. Amari Cooper, he's on the wrong side of 30. Jerry Jeudy's never done anything in the NFL. He's not proven that he can actually be a good player. And there's a legitimate shot here that Tillman could be the number 2 target in the offense potentially, all sort of centered around how much they want to involve David Njoku. And there's obviously a lot of question marks here, but obviously as well, we're not necessarily sure how good Deshaun Watson is, but we do expect this to be a more pass-heavy offense in Cleveland than what it's been in the past. And I think really what this is just a bet on is the talent of Cedric Tillman. I think personally, he's a good player. He's 6'3". He should easily be potentially a go-to player in the red zone for this team. If Deshaun Watson can be even decent, I think he's got a shot at sort of a spike touchdown season. I'm not a believer in Jerry Jeudy. Obviously, I don't think anybody's a believer in Elijah Moore anymore. Amari Cooper, he's probably going to miss time again this season. Good player, but he's obviously trending in the wrong direction over the next several years over the course of his career. So Tillman's got an opportunity here, and he's got the draft capital. He's a good player. He's certainly somebody that I could see being a sort of surprise impact player in fantasy this season. And again, he's free. If you're in deeper leagues, I think he's going to be valuable, a reliable player that's seeing the field quite a bit for this Browns offense, who are going to run 3 wide receiver sets quite a bit this year. And I think there's a lot to like here in Tillman. And again, the price tag is nothing. I think it's worth a dart throw, especially in deeper leagues. And the last player I want to highlight here is going to be Ray Davis, and he's the rookie running back that was drafted by the Buffalo Bills this season. And I want to start this off by prefacing by saying that I am a huge believer in James Cook this season. I do think James Cook's going to end up having a really monster year, so I'm not necessarily expecting this one to pan out, but I just had to highlight him because the opportunity really is there for Ray Davis. Davis has a legitimate shot at being the goal line running back in Buffalo. We haven't seen them be comfortable giving that part of this running back room to James Cook yet, and that translated to Latavius Murray ranking 11th amongst all running backs in the NFL in carries inside the 5. He somehow only turned that into 4 touchdowns. That was obviously not good enough for them. They're lucky they have Josh Allen to sort of bail them out there. But I think that we could easily see Ray Davis be given this goal line role. He's going to be used on short yardage situations. He's a guy that should be involved enough in the offense, especially even as a rookie. He's a guy that's got a shot to be a guy that could potentially score double-digit touchdowns. It's not outside of the realm of possibility. Like I said, Latavius Murray had more than 10 rushing attempts inside the 5 last season. We could easily see Davis just get all of those, and if he gets super lucky, we could see a really high-end touchdown output from Davis. On top of that, if something were to happen to James Cook, there is only Ty Johnson behind Ray Davis competition here. Ray Davis would probably slot into a really big role in this offense, and that's sort of what we're looking for with players being drafted this late. You're looking for guys with a lot of upside, a reasonable path towards touches without an injury, and then a huge increase in opportunity if an injury were to happen above him, and I think that could potentially happen here with Davis. Again, I do believe in James Cook quite a bit this season, but I think there is a path here for Ray Davis to be really good, and I think he needs to be on people's radars, especially before he ends up being a popular waiver pick during this season. Next, I just wanted to talk about 6 players who just barely missed the cut. These are guys that I would have loved to talk about, but were just a little bit too high in ADP. They were being drafted between picks 100 and picks 150, so they didn't make the cut here, but I do think they're really great sleeper options, and these are probably the guys that you're going to see a lot more commonly on sleeper articles or videos you guys will watch. So I'll probably make a video where I'll highlight some more shallower league sleepers, because I know not all of you guys are playing in 12 or 14 team leagues, so these guys are sort of sleepers to you that are drafted in 10 team leagues and stuff like that. So I'll make a video that sort of dives deeper into these players as well. But starting off here with Davian Wix, currently being drafted just around pick 120. The talent's clearly there. He looked really great on a per route run basis in Green Bay last season. The only issue is just is going to see the field. We know that Jaden Reed's a really great player. Christian Watson has shown how great he can be in spurts. Romeo Doubs is a really good player as well. Wix, there's just a lot of talent in this Green Bay Packers offense. So the concern is just, is Wix going to be able to see the field? But I do think there's an opportunity for Wix to potentially step up and even be the wide receiver 2 in this offense. Christian Watson has never shown an ability to stay on the field. Romeo Doubs, I think he's just a good wide receiver 3. I don't think he's a special player. I know we're going to get reports out of minicamp this season that Romeo Doubs is having a really great offseason, but we hear that every single offseason, and he just ends up being a low-end flex player. So I think we know who Romeo Dobbs is at this point, and they've made a lot of comparisons to between Dontavian Wicks and Devontae Adams, just in terms of how he moves, in terms of short area quickness, work ethic off the field. They're not saying he's going to be Devontae Adams, but LaFleur has been vocal about saying that he does remind him of that in many ways, and we saw it on the field. He's a really good player, and I think that the sky really is the limit for him, and it's just a matter of whether or not he can stay on the field and be like an actual meaningful and impact player for this Packers offense. After that, we've got Ricky Pearsall, the rookie first-round pick by the San Francisco 49ers. Just a really good player. Reports out of minicamp are that he's just been absolutely phenomenal this offseason, and really this all just hinges on whether or not Ayuk gets moved before the season starts. If Pearsall ends up being the number 2 wide receiver in San Francisco, he's got a legitimate shot at being a top 36 wide receiver in this offense, and even without that, I think he's going to be involved enough. I think we're going to see less and less involvement out of George Kittle. We could see Pearsall still put up some spike weeks. So I like him quite a bit. I think he's a really good player. It's just a matter of whether or not Ayuk and the target share is there for him. Next, we've got Chase Brown. Just picked a couple picks too early for me to talk about him, and I've actually been really vocal about how much I like Zach Moss this season, but again, I want to be highlighting good offenses with ambiguous backfields. Chase Brown is one of 2 players who could be super involved in this Bengals backfield, and if he ends up winning out on that role, he could easily be a rock star for fantasy. He's an explosive player on a points per touch basis, a player that's had a lot of explosive plays in the screen game last season. I like the talent. I don't know if they trust him enough in pass protection for him to end up being super reliable, but if he ends up winning that role somehow, he could easily be a rock star for us. Marshawn Lloyd, the 3rd-round draft pick by the Green Bay Packers, is going to start behind Josh Jacobs, but they've been super vocal about how explosive he looks. He gives them a bit of a different mold compared to what Dillon and Josh Jacobs offer them. They've even been very vocal saying that he is a much more explosive player. He's going to be a guy that's got a lot more speed for this offense, and that might be a guy that could potentially just be better than Josh Jacobs. It remains to be seen if last season was sort of a fluke for Jacobs or if Jacobs is actually still a good player. So there's an opportunity here for Lloyd to be an impact player even without an injury to Jacobs. If Jacobs got hurt, Lloyd would be the immediate RB1 in a really good offense. So that would obviously be just wheels up, sky's the limit for him in that case. Ty Chandler, I've talked about him a couple times. He's probably going to operate in a timeshare for the Vikings along with Aaron Jones. And Aaron Jones is another player who continues to miss time. He's aging out a little bit. We're seeing him on a bit of a decline over the course of the last several years. And I think Chandler's a good player in what should be a relatively good offense with how great the weapons are there. Chandler could easily handle a workhorse role. We saw a monster game out of him last season. He's shown he can handle that role, and I think he's a good enough player that he could be super relevant this year. And then Jermaine Burton, the rookie wide receiver for the Cincinnati Bengals. They did lose Tyler Boyd, who was actually number 2 on the team in targets last season, ahead of T. Higgins. There are actually quite a bit of targets to be had in this offense, especially because we know that Chase and Higgins are probably going to combine to miss a few games this year at a minimum. If there were an injury to one of those 2 that was going to be significant, Burton would immediately slot in as the number 2 wide receiver for Joe Burrow. And I think Burton's a really good player. He averaged a depth target last season in college of 20 yards downfield. He's going to be a guy who's a legitimate deep threat. He kind of can do everything that T. Higgins can do, and I think he's going to be a really good player for them. So really excited. My bad there. Really excited to see what could happen with Burton this season. I think he could be a really good player for us, and he's definitely worth taking a look at. That'll do it for this sleeper video. That was like 11 players that are currently being drafted outside of the top 150 that I'm super excited about this season. Up next, I'm going to go over my auction draft values. I've had a lot of you guys wait for those, so I'm going to sort of go, not necessarily player by player, but I'll sort of break the players into tiers. It's probably going to be a 4-part series. I'll have to go quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end, but I'll just sort of show you guys how much I'm willing to pay for each section of player. I'll also publish those auction draft values on a website somewhere so you guys can see those and download those and modify them as you want. So that's going to be super exciting. And then sort of big announcement here, we're going to be doing the Listener League again, or Viewer League, Subscriber League, whatever you want to call it. That's going to be up and running again. We've obviously got 10 spots open because myself and last season's champion will be in it. So for those 10 spots, if you guys are interested, please comment on this video or any of the subsequent videos. Just give me your email address, why you want to be in the league, how long you've been a subscriber, and if I do select you, I'll send you an email inviting you to the league, and you'll have 24 hours to accept it and join the group chat so we can get that going. If you don't accept that in time, I'm going to have to give your spot to someone else so that we can make sure people are active. But it's going to be super fun. You can also email me if you're interested in the league. I'll put the email in the comment or the thumbnail of this video as well so you guys can see that. But it's going to be super exciting to do that. It was a lot of fun to do that last season, and I'm excited to play with you guys all again this year as well. So Other than that, I'm going to keep putting out videos like 3 to 5 a week over the course of the next several months. Going to do even more over the course of the regular season, and we'll be here all year long to give you guys free content to help you guys win your leagues. So if you guys want to make sure you don't miss out on any of that, just make sure you subscribe to the channel. Click the bell so you get notifications when new videos come out. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Help with the algorithm and helps you know that I'm doing a great job. So appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you next time. Peace. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.